The JFK Assassination, Its Impact on Our Country by Taylor Storm. On November 22, 1963, President John F. Kennedy was riding in an open motorcade through Dallas when he was assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald. This encounter required the country to rethink presidential security, FBI investigations, vice presidential succession, and how to keep a country together in a time of public crisis. In July of 1941, a young man named John F. Kennedy joined the U.S. Navy, along with his eldest brother, Joe. Little did he know that less than 6 months later, the U.S. would enter World War II after being attacked by Japan at Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. In the summer of 1943, Kennedy was sent off to war with a small group of men on a boat named PT-109. In the dead of night, as his squad was looking around for any sight of some enemy boats, they saw the massive Japanese destroyer, Amagiri, looming above them, just a couple hundred meters away. Around 2 a.m., PT-109 was split in half, strewing the crew away from the boat. Once Kennedy found all of the living crew members, he brought them all to safety on a nearby island, where the natives secured them with their allies. On June 12, 1944, Kennedy received a Purple Heart for his heroic actions. Tragically, just over 2 years after John and his brother Joe enrolled in the Navy, Joe was killed in action while serving as a land-based patrol bomber pilot. As a result of his death, John was now appointed the position of family politician by his father, Joe Kennedy Sr., and ambassador to the United Kingdom. In 1946, he was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives from Massachusetts with 69,093 votes. Again in 1958, Kennedy won another term in the Senate, this time going unmarried. He and Jackie Kennedy, over the course of 5 years, had become a major power couple in U.S. politics and the media. In January of 1960, John announced that he was running for president. He was running against Richard Nixon, who was currently the vice president to Dwight Eisenhower. In July, Kennedy announced that his running mate would be Lyndon Johnson, a Texas native. With his alluring charm and talent for public speaking, Kennedy appealed more to the public than old, angry Nixon. On November 8th, the ballots were counted and the results were in. Mr. John F. Kennedy was now the youngest president ever elected, at the age of 43. One of the accomplishments of President Kennedy was in 1962, during the Cold War, when he orchestrated the successful withdrawal of enemy missiles in Cuba, later known as the Cuban Missile Crisis. He maintained a very high public approval rating, and he and Jackie continued their political and social prowess. On November 21, 1963, President John Kennedy and wife Jackie departed the White House for Texas in pursuit of another term in office. The whole trip was scheduled for the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. Like all events, not everything went as planned. Jackie Kennedy, who rarely accompanied her husband on business trips, had decided to go along in hopes to gain more popularity with voters for the next election. The purpose of riding through Dallas was to get Texans more excited about the next presidential election. Texas Governor Connally and his wife Nellie rode alongside the president and his wife. The Connollys sat in the front of the presidential motorcade, while Mr. and Mrs. Kennedy sat in the second row of the car. They were going to drive through Dealey Plaza, around 11:45 a.m. The people of Dallas were so enthusiastic that Kennedy had the car slowed down enough for him to stick his hand out the car and shake hands with the people who were shouting his name. This continued on until the security guards realized that they were running short on time, so the motorcade picked up speed. As they were turning onto the next street, shots were heard. Clint Hill, the bodyguard in charge of First Lady Jackie, immediately jumped onto the rear wheel of the vehicle. Unfortunately, the president had already been hit, in the throat. As hard as Clint tried to cover the bodies, a bullet snuck past and pierced Kennedy in the back of the head, just above his right ear, exploding with a violent eruption of blood, brain matter, and fragments of the skull. The motorcade rushed off the track to Parkland Hospital in hope of possibly saving the president. Once they arrived, everybody hopped out of the car, except for the Kennedys. Jackie refused to let anyone see John in the state he was in, so a guard wrapped his jacket around the head before Jackie let go of him. Inside the hospital, no one knew what was going on except for Jacqueline Kennedy and the operators in the room working on the president. Around 1 o'clock Central Standard Time, all of the hospital knew about the condition of the president. Dead. Reporters were swarming the hospital, hoping to catch a fragment of news, but the report they got came at 1:38 p.m.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago. Vice President Lyndon Johnson has left the hospital in Dallas, but we do not know to where he has proceeded. Presumably, he will be taking the oath of office shortly and become the 36th President of the United States.
In response to the news, there were varied reactions across the country. Women cried, men tried not to, and children broke out in tears because their parents were crying. Vice President Johnson, his wife, and widow Jackie Kennedy boarded Air Force One to return to Washington, D.C. from Dallas. On Air Force One, Johnson was sworn in as the 36th President of the United States at 2:38 p.m. Lyndon Johnson is still the only president to be sworn in by a woman, Sarah T. Hughes, who was also aboard the aircraft. Immediately after the president's death announcement, an officer in Dallas thought he saw a suspicious man lurking around stores. The man, named Lee Harvey Oswald, shot the officer and then dove into a movie theater to escape any eyes that might have seen him. Fortunately, a shop clerk was working and saw Oswald slip into the Texas theater. From there, the police were notified and Lee was arrested and brought to the Dallas police headquarters. 2 days later, as Oswald was being transferred to the county jail, Jack Ruby, a nightclub owner, ran out of the crowd and shot Oswald. He died at 1:07 p.m.
The man who saw the shot fired said it was fired by a man wearing a black hat, a brown coat, a man that everyone down here thought was a Secret Service agent.
At the burial at Arlington on the 25th, Jackie held the flag that had covered her husband's coffin close to her during the ceremony, as if she was giving John one last hug. When the time came, she tucked the flag under her arm and took the lit torch from a military officer and lit the eternal flame. The eternal flame is meant to be a symbol of hope for the country, which was so excited for what Kennedy had intended to accomplish in his presidency. President John Kennedy had always been a big supporter of civil rights. He wanted all people to be equal. He genuinely liked Martin Luther King Jr. and respected his views. He wanted to sign the Civil Rights Act. However, none of this happened in his lifetime. In 1964, President Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act because he believed that doing so would be the best way of honoring the late president. Kennedy also influenced the use of television for presidential conferences, debates, and even wife Jackie gave a few tours of the White House. Ever since Kennedy, politics have been advertised on television much more, broadcasting every debate, State of the Union address, important speech given by the president, and inaugurations.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man.
Presidential security at the time wasn't all that closed in on the president. Because of this, Kennedy was allowed to ride through Dallas with an open-top car, because that's just what presidents did. After he got assassinated, no political figure can ride in an open-top car in fear of something bad happening to the passengers. Since then, FBI investigations have gone more in depth on a crime scene, handling every object in questioning with lots of care. They also try to collect as much information as possible, not wash it away. The Kennedy assassination sent the country into slow motion, making the government rethink presidential security, FBI investigations, vice presidential succession, and how to keep a country together in a time of public crisis.